This Sunday, Stephen Rea and cellist Neil Martin will perform Seamus Heaney's translation of Book 6 of Virgil's Aeneid at the Abbey Theatre in Dublin. The event is organised in support of Youth Horizons in Jobestown, which offers a second chance at education to young people. And Stephen Rea joins me now from Belfast to tell us more. This particular work of Seamus Heaney's, first of all, Stephen, how important a work is it, and in what ways does it speak to you?
Well, it's important because it's the last piece of work he did, and it's just perfect in its achievement. As usual with Heaney, although it's about huge classical things, the language is high flown but also very intimate, and it touches everyone's ears. I mean, it's breathtaking in a way.
You talk about the language being high flown, but it also has that very earthy and real quality that a lot of Heaney's language has, the South Derry quality.
Yeah.
How well do you identify with that?
Well, I totally identify with it because I think that writers like Heaney give actors like me permission to speak the way we do and to accept the authenticity of how we speak, not the dialectic authenticity, but the emotional authenticity of how we use our voice, rather than flattening it out into some kind of neutral speech, that we can use the colour of our voice in response to this amazing language.
It's a particularly heartfelt story that's at the heart of Book 6.
Yeah. Well, he's looking for his father who's died. I think everyone responds to that, and longing to see him again. It's immensely moving, and of course it's immensely moving that Seamus died just after he had done it, and people are still longing to see him.
Much was made of the fact that, of Heaney's own relationship with his father, and that might have fed into this particular book. Does that help you in the performance of it in any way?
Well, I mean, one of the most moving things that happened when we performed this in Kilkenny was that Seamus's daughter Catherine mentioned that this sequence that I may read for you in a minute, that when I did the father, she says, it was Paddy Heaney. It sounded like Paddy Heaney,
Like Seamus's own dad.
Yeah. So I'm very moved by that, and but it probably sounds like anyone's father, and that it wasn't a high-flown classical father. It was a man standing in a field, and I think people respond to that.
So let's hear the section that you're talking about. Maybe give us the context of Aeneas has been in this long journey down searching for his father. Give us that context before you read the piece, Stephen.
Well, he's had this amazingly long journey and seen terrible things and fought wild beasts and everything, and then he and Aeneas and the Sibyl are coming down the hill where they should meet his father. So it starts. Elsewhere, Anchises, fatherly and intent, was off in a deep green valley, surveying and reviewing souls consigned there, those due to pass to the light of the upper world. It so happened he was just then taking note of his whole posterity, the destinies and doings, traits and qualities of descendants dear to him. But seeing Aeneas come wading through the grass towards him, he reached his two hands out in eager joy. His eyes filled up with tears, and he gave a cry. At last! Are you here at last? I always trusted that your sense of right would prevail and keep you going to the end. And am I now allowed to see your face, my son, and hear you talk and talk to you myself? This is what I imagined and looked forward to as I counted the days. And my trust was not misplaced. To think of the lands and the outlying seas you have crossed, my son, to receive this welcome. And after such dangers. I was afraid that Africa might be your undoing. But Aeneas replied, often and often, Father, you would appear to me. Your sad shade would appear. And that kept me going to this end. My ships are anchored in the Tuscan sea. Let me take your hand, my father, oh, let me, and do not hold back from my embrace. And as he spoke, he wept. 3 times he tried to reach arms round that neck. 3 times the form, reached for in vain, escaped like a breeze between his hands. A dream on wings.
Stephen Rea reading from Seamus Heaney's translation of Book 6 of Virgil's Aeneid. Stephen will be reading that entire translation along with cellist Neil Martin, who will perform alongside him at the Abbey Theatre this Sunday in an event in support of Youth Horizons in Jobestown. Maybe, Stephen, just explain how the performance works in terms of the interaction between yourself and Neil Martin.
Well, we're very in tune with each other because we've done a lot together. Really, it started, I said to him, why don't I say the first word and then you start playing on the second word? And that's the way it works. And we look at each other, and I mean, there are certain prepared points where he will have solos and certain points where I will speak unaccompanied. But basically, it's just a marriage of the musical voice and the spoken voice, So it's a huge pleasure to do.
I saw you perform the piece, in fact, when you did it in Kilkenny at the festival, and that was one of the striking aspects, was that communication between yourself and Neil. How loose are the structures that you've set down? Is it totally organic? I mean, if I went to see it again on Sunday night, will I hear a very different realisation of the piece?
Well, you'll hear certain things that will be the same, certain musical moments, but and hopefully the text will be the same. But it's mostly extemporised, and he will look at me and I'll sit back and let him play, or I'll look at him and tell him it's time we got back to the words,
In your work with Field Day, you produced many adaptations of classic texts, and I suppose in the case of Seamus Heaney, I would think immediately of The Curate Troy. It was a version of the story of Philoctetes, classical tale, and at the time many parallels were drawn to the situation in Northern Ireland, and that perhaps there were parallels there. Do you see any parallels in the story that's told in this Book 6 with contemporary stories?
Well, there's so much pain in it, he sees the future, he sees his own future. Aeneas, his father, takes him and shows him his own future, and although it's all about Rome, imperial Rome, it's all about the end of that too. And I suppose there are certain empires around that we wouldn't object to them disappearing, There's a huge sadness at the heart of it, that for whatever you achieve, you lose it in the end, I think. And that's life, isn't it, Sean,
And certainly that sadness is very much there in the section that you read from us. A very moving section, in fact. Just before we finish up, Stephen, I should ask you about Youth Horizons in Jobestown and this organisation that offers a second chance at education for young people. Why is that so important for you? Why did you want to be involved in this fundraiser?
Well, I went to an occasion where Sister Maria Hughes spoke about Youth Horizons, and I went and visited the school, and it was put to me that I might do something, so I thought I would do this, particularly as in the introduction to the Seamus's book, he stresses how important his education was in St Colum's in Derry, and a priest, Father McGlinchey, had given him the classics. And you know yourself, Sean, how our lives had been transformed by education. Sister Maria went to Jobestown. She saw these kids wandering around from homes affected by drugs and alcohol, and she just set up a building and invited these kids in. Now, at this stage, 20 years later, some of them have become teachers, some of them have gone to university. It's a huge achievement. And I think it's a template for how people should approach community, offering them education. And I think education is too settled in advantaged areas, and we have to be looking at the disadvantaged areas more and more. And that's what this woman, Sister Rea, is doing. It's thrilling what she's achieved.
Well, the organisation that Stephen Rea is involved in is called Youth Horizons Jobstown, offering second chance education to young people. And the event in the Abbey Theatre on Sunday evening with Stephen Rea and cellist Neil Martin performing Seamus Heaney's translation of Book 6 of Virgil's Aeneid will be in aid of Youth Horizons. You can find out full information about the event on abbeytheatre.ie.